Hi everyone. It's not surprising to me to see so many people here to celebrate Anne. She is just radiant. I met her for the first time. I was teaching at Hub City's Writing in Place along with my wife Nicole, who very much wishes she could have been here. And Anne just gave us this huge beaming smile and welcomed us into the group of glorious women that she was a part of. I see Susan Craig here, and I'm sure there are more here. And yeah, and I'm just so grateful that we've been able to stay in touch, and I could read her poems, and now that all of you can read her poems thanks to Muddy Ford Press. So I'm going to be reading two poems. I'm going to begin with, and Anne, this book is just beautiful. I just want to take this opportunity to say it publicly. It was very hard to select the poem to read. So I'm gonna begin with An Artist Renders the 1918 Eclipse. Howard Russell Butler preferred oil and canvas to the physics he studied at Princeton. Earned fluency in the language of pigment, could name all the hues of blue. He commanded a lexicon of motion, quiver, flare, drag honed from the commissions for a dozen portraits of Andrew Carnegie, a restive subject for 2-hour sittings. That June, while the Great War raged, Butler set his easel on a rural plain in Oregon in the company of scientists and telescopes. Cameras had proven inadequate. They wanted Butler. Everyone readied themselves. Butler chose a blindfold to dark adapt his eyes. At the precise moment an astronomer signaled, Butler's graphite scored his paper. The air moved from the brisk strokes of his sure hand. After 2 minutes, the astronomer warned them. Butler retreated to his impromptu studio on site, blocked out colors and movement on canvas he saw with his eyes. From this, he created paintings which a century later still hold their force. And I had to look this up. I had to look up these beautiful images, which I highly recommend doing, not now, but later. And I found this great quote by the director of the expedition that Butler was on. Who is not interested in the total eclipse of the sun? He who has once seen such an eclipse can never forget it, the slow but graduate obscuration of the sun, the darkness covering the face of the earth, even at noontime, and the glorious sight that meets the eye during the few short minutes of totality. And I was so struck by these words because to me, they speak so beautifully to both the poem and to Anne as a writer. With Butler, you have this artist who is able to capture by hand what a camera of his time could not, which is incredible, who trained himself to render with his senses and with the descriptions of other people the world that he could not see. He had that blindfold on, there was an eclipse. And with Anne, you have this incredible writer whose sight has undergone that same graduate obscuration. But these are the poems that record a poet who sees with her entire being, right? Who sees with more than sight. And this poem in particular, and why I wanted to begin with it, feels like a very personal ars poetica, right? A description of Anne's own stunning process of recall and writing. And it's just a beautiful poem. And I'm just going to read one more brief but equally stunning poem, which to me really indicates where Anne received so much of the strength that you find in these pages. In these lines, you're going to hear a plea for presence and awareness, even in difficult situations when it would be easier to turn away, which we're really being faced with so often right now. And there's also a directive for the speaker to share what she observes with the power of unadorned truth. Say the words, instructions from my mother. When I die, say the words. Say that I died. Say she died. Say my mother died, not that I passed away, passed on, not that you lost me. I am not lost. I am dead. Say the words. Say that I died. Thank you, Anne.
And thank you, Anne, for inviting me to be with you all today. What a privilege, what an honor. And I'm so happy about your book. And Jessica, you are truly a stunning reader,
Yes.
a commenter on poems. I could listen to you all day, and I love your voice. So thank you I just feel very touched to come after you, Jessica. And I felt the same way about the poem, Say the Words, which both of you have mentioned. I felt that it was a poem of a lifetime. It was a poem I had been waiting for all my lifetime, and I had never seen anyone write it before you, Anne. You have done such majestic, gorgeous revelation making in this beautiful book. So thank you, Ed, for all you've done to bring it into being. I'd like to read my comment from the back, if that's okay. I rarely have such an opportunity, but I feel this about all your poems, Anne. I'm in awe of the masterful clarity, the perfectly weighted brevity of Anne Humphreys' poems. There's an immense comfort in her vivid scenes, her people and places so rich in presence, and her clear gaze, a stunning collection.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked two of all these poems I love for today. I'm reading first, Noble Cause. That's what I need, a noble cause, now that the children stoke their own fires. As for me, I have plowed fields and slopped hogs for worthy causes, registered opinions that vanish like dry ice on lawmaker tallies, served as Sunday school teacher, bazaar co-chair, neighborhood newsletter editor, packaged, stamped, and mailed all that to the next generation, corralled favorite family stories, lassoed photographs into albums, chopped in half household inventory, weighed and measured it into parcels for sons and wives and auctioneers, staked a claim on a smaller home, rode herd on renovations, lay funeral plans in church files, signed contracts on property beneath the pastor's window, surrounded by flowers and friends, boxed up interviews, awards, and newspaper articles, apogees of career orbits, and stored them in the attic. Now everything has its place. Then nothing. No more pencils scratching off lists, nor rhythm and beat of projects to fill my days. After all this, I drive my wagon team, emptied of chores and obligations, to the overlook of an unscheduled life, with its broad and frightening plain. Wow. And I just kept saying the word wow over and over again when I first read these poems. And the other poem I would like to share today, and I'd like to mention that the sections of this poem have little stars in between them, which is a particularly appealing device that I love to read in other people's poems and sometimes to work with myself. And you were just so amazing to use them so effectively in the poem called 9 Days. I don't want to hear the house was torn down. I wore my wedding dress there. On her way to work, past pink dogwoods, she saw a horse on the sidewalk. I stand on my head in the corner, discipline for new perspectives. He unwrapped the cloth to polish my glasses to gleam in April's light. The camera crew films a reporter in the storm. Traffic signs fly by. I move my sleeveless dresses to the guest closet and switch for sweaters. I mark my keyboard with dots, place my fingers there, and begin to type. Corsage on her wrist, she covered her smile to hide the gaps in her teeth. She snapped my portrait in fall foliage, said, "There's your funeral picture." Oh, Anne, we celebrate your voice.
So I also just want to thank Ed, first of all, for putting these books out. Tim's book, which of course is one of my favorites as well, and now Anne's. I mean, it's a really great thing you're doing. And I just wrote in the chat, what a love fest. This is a love fest to such a beautiful woman and beautiful collection. I just want to say something about endorsing her book. You know, you do blurbs for books and maybe get a thank you email. And Anne sent us a gift with a signed copy of her book, and mine is a little crystal that hangs in my kitchen and refracts rainbows all over my house. So I think of her all the time. But I thought, has anyone ever thanked me for doing that? I don't think so. I mean, I just want to say that it really is a reflection of her beautiful spirit, which shines through these poems. When I wrote about the poems, I talked about the wisdom in these poems, and I really learned just so much about being a human being, reading this work. And I chose a poem from toward the beginning of the book. The poem is The Virtual Tour, and then another poem at the end of the book, which is of course in three different sections. And the sounds in this poem, The Virtual Tour, are so beautiful. There's so much alliteration and assonance. And for those of you who aren't poets, I mean, the combination of sounds, letter sounds across the line, a kind of chiming, that's just gorgeous. And I love reading these poems out loud. So I'll read The Virtual Tour. She counts off 19 steps to the porch, crosses the threshold to plunge into a pool of April sun, planing through the picture window. She feels its warm gold on her thighs. From the voices she knows so well, she hears nuanced tones of their pleasure and pride. They coach her to angle the lens to highlight the red rocker, pie safe, sun self-portrait. The bound carpet leads to the back door and courtyard with blue jays sassing in the sugar maple. She weather vanes north, south, east, west, considers where to hang a hammock. Back inside, she trails the chair rail to the entry, curtsies her goodbyes, unfolds a white cane to tap her way to the mailbox. This poem, you know, is really a window into Anne's daily lived experience, but it is also just such a celebration of the ordinary events of the day, which we value in all poems, I think. So it's a gorgeous poem. And I was so pleased that no one else had already wanted to read that one because it's one of my favorites. And now I'm going to read a poem called The Fallen Pine. And it's on facing a page called Portrait of a Husband. And it's really a love poem. And I think it's also a poem that uses the fallen pine as sort of a metaphor for how we get through all the crises in our lives with our partners. Fallen pine. It is immense. My arms cannot circle it. Last night's downburst snapped its base like a bone. I pose, a weightlifter beneath the trunk. Here, pine borer beetles grind the pulp. We step off its 100 feet with the slow fall of time from its 100 years. Will we have the privilege of a long life? I don't know, but if you fall, I will catch you.